Okay, I'm on the farm with Adi Badenhorst, one of the trailblazers in Swartland. We've just tasted some splendid wines, all of them blends. And my first question is just the idea of blending and co-fermenting versus making single varieties. What was the thinking behind it?
I think the idea behind it is to take away the decision-making process. I don't want to go into the vineyards and pick Shiraz separately and Mourvèdre and Grenache and ferment them separately, and then after 12 months decide, okay, 3% of that, 10%, because they grow together in vineyards, either co-plantation or in very close proximity to each other. And I think it's got to do with the authenticity of a wine, to pick everything together, ferment them together.
And at the same time.
Pick them at the same time and ferment them together. So we're working with different ripenesses.
Right.
Whatever ripeness means, we can get into that later, but for us we pick on freshness and flavor. So when we pick a vineyard, the Shiraz might be a little bit riper than the Grenache or the Cinsault, but we have a reasonable intuition or feeling of what they're going to be like together in the tank.
And that explains why these wines rarely are even 14 degrees alcohol.
Yeah, 2015 vintage, I think our ripest wine is 13.5 or something, and that's Barbarossa. It's a funny little grape grown on the west coast, and that was picked a month after everything else. But no, we pick for freshness and acidity, and we want that red fruit spectrum.
Is that typical for among your neighbors that are making wine here?
Yes.
Because I saw, I think in America anyway, we would think of this as a hot, dry region. And I think people will be very surprised to see a wine that could be as low as 12.8 alcohol or a lot of 13.5.
No, it is a hot, dry region. This year has been very, very dry, and it is warm during the vintage. So you'd expect some... It's a chicken carrying on there. You'd expect some sort of form of desiccation when you come to pick.
Right, exactly.
But it's completely the opposite. We're picking for freshness. We're picking much earlier, and unfortunately, I grew up with believing the corrupting dogmas that you need to pick on physiological ripeness or phenolic ripeness. The guys at UC Davis, the guys with the thick glasses that read a lot, and the Australians, they've written books about it. There's articles being published about it and how to measure the perfect physiological ripeness of grapes. But what it means in South Africa is 15.5% alcohol, 16% at those specifics. And what that means, of course, you can't drink the wine. So we are picking on psychological ripeness, which works for us. Wines that you can drink, wines that take a step back, that aren't opulent, that aren't overly aromatic. I hope, especially talking about my wines, that are particularly tannic in a way.
But they're about much more than fruit, obviously.
Of course, they're about balance, they're about elegance, they're about length and freshness. So, the most important quality to me with any of the wines of my own wines is the fact that there must be a savory finish to the wines. The wines must finish dry, savory, and they must make you thirsty. You're not gonna drink these wines in conjunction, taste them with super ripe, well-made wines. They're gonna really take the backseat. But these wines are about subtleness
and better with food as well.
Great with food.
Just this morning I tasted a dozen different varieties or more in these wines. Since it's still kind of early days for Swartland, what do you think will be the best varieties here 20 years from today?
Yeah, it's such a personal thing. You'll speak to my neighbors, and everyone will have their own preference. At the moment, we're dealing with what we've got. At the moment, I've got on Kalmoesfontein and on my property, amazing Shiraz. Really incredible old Grenache, the oldest Grenache in South Africa, and Cinsault. Cinsault, Grenache, the poor man's Pinots. These are amazing grapes to work with, and I'm just discovering what they were. There are hundreds of other varieties that we can plant.
You mentioned the Portuguese varieties.
The Portuguese varieties, and the Sicilian. As you know, the New World has been planted to Cabernet, Shiraz, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, etc. There's 5 grapes, and that's such a pity. We have still got to discover what works here. So the new vineyards that we're planting, we're going to be planting a few other varietals. just to see what happens. Because my children must sort of carry on, hopefully, and find out what really works here.
Right.
I'm just working with what I've got at the moment.
What about the concept of terroir? Is it? I mean, these wines are essentially blends. Ibn Sadi also said he was interested in having representation from the four mountains, and he really was not a believer in terroir, or that was his terroir character, capturing the entire region. Is it just too early to know?
I don't know what terroir means. You know, to be honest, the longer I live on this property and make wine from these grapes, the more I realize there is obviously a very, very strong soil aspect coming through.
No matter what variety.
No matter what variety.
Right.
But, you know, we also have to start listening to our own stories and the stories of our neighbors and the way they farm, the impact of man on vineyards is also tremendous. And those kind of stories are often, because they can't be measured, are not brought into the equation. I like to add a lot of weight to those stories, the neighbors, the guys I buy grapes from, how they farmed over 5 or 6 generations has certainly got a massive impact on the grapes I buy. So terroir, yeah, it's and I'm sure certain varieties express it better than others, like Grenache and Cinsault, I think. But yeah, we're just discovering it.
If Stellenbosch was St. Helena or Oakville, what would Swartland be?
No, I've never been to Oakville, never been to St. Helena, but the Swartland is probably, I think, completely incomparable to any other region. It has been dominated by one winery for so long. Stellenbosch is the wine center of South Africa.
Right.
If you want to reference great old South African wines, you go to Stellenbosch, you taste the great Chateau Libertases, the Rustenburgs, the Zonneblooms. We drink a lot of those wines, and that's a kind of reference. The Swartland has always made wine for a long time, but has always been in the background. And I think only now that we finally decided these are the varietals we're going to work with, that we can actually make an impression. The varieties we work
There's so much local interest in these wines.
Yes.
It almost feels like this is the future of South African wine.
I don't know, but it's maybe a fad, but the guys here, my colleagues, guys making wine, have got the same passion, of course.
Right.
We've got a passion for making wine. We all make our own wines. We formed what we call the Swartland Independent Producers Association, and it's a very difficult thing, you know. It's got rules. People think of the Swartland as there's no rules, but there's a manifesto and there's a set of rules. Because it's a different thing sitting around a barbecue.
For example.
Well, it's a different thing sitting around a barbecue and saying, hey, listen, you mustn't add any yeast to your wine, don't add any acid, or, you know, mustn't add too much oak. That's fair and well, drinking a few bottles of wine around the barbecue while turning a steak, than to actually putting that into writing. It's like going to church. You know, it's like listening to a sermon. A very good sermon will disturb the comforted and comfort the disturbed. It's that kind of balance to put that whole philosophical point of view into written rules. So but the guys are game for it. You've got to make a mark somewhere, and obviously there'll be criticism this way and that way, and say, oh, but this wine is this and that. But at least there's something in writing, and that's what the farmers, the growers are, and the winemakers are working towards. The producers.
But you still went in with kind of a blank slate.
Yes, yeah,
really.
yeah. No, of course.
I mean, I guess Syrah was the first grape that made an impression in the export markets, or maybe wines that we think of as Syrah, but they're still blends.
But if you speak to any of the guys here in the Swartland, you ask them what made an impression, they would say the old Cinsaults.
Right.
From Swartland Winery from the early 70s. Amazing wines. 1971, 1972.
And they were varietally bottled?
And they were varietally bottled, and you taste these wines, they are mind-boggling. The fruit and the purity is still there, and that you think, shit, you know?
I've been really impressed.
Since 40 years old, Swartland, whew.
And they're wonderfully aromatic. Also.
Exactly.
The aromatic complexity of the wines.
Exactly.
I guess I tasted a few Swartland wines while I was at wineries in Stellenbosch, and
yes.
they really stood out. And maybe they stood out also for lower alcohol.
Perhaps.
In some cases.
I don't think it's something that we're specifically aiming or want to market, but if you're not going to add acidity, you're not going to add acid, you need to pick earlier
Right.
for that natural acidity and that kind of balance. That's why we're ending up with 13. You know, as I said this year, below 13 alcohol. You know, just to get that balance. But yeah, the big impression for me when I first arrived here was the old Sinsa's from Swartland Winery and the Tinta Barocca. And they called it Tintas das Barocas, and it was incredible.
And you also, of course, have the advantage of stocks of old vines here.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it feels like driving around the Swartland, around every hilltop, around every corner, you're going to find a vineyard that has got amazing potential.
Right.
And of course, all vineyards do have amazing potential. They just have to be harnessed, and you just have to have an idea of how it can work.
A lot has happened in 10 years, essentially, right?
I've been here, 7 or 8 years, and the time has flown. It feels like a millisecond.
Good. Thank you very much.
Stephen, nice to have you. Thanks.